The Devil's Mirror Part 1. Chapter 1. The Mirror Beckons. The rain came down like a slow funeral, each droplet tapping against the iron balconies of the old city like skeletal fingers. Isadora Moreau tightened her shawl around her shoulders as she moved through the crooked market street, her steps echoing hollowly against worn cobblestones. It was not the place for a woman alone at twilight. But Isadora was no longer concerned with propriety. Grief had a way of stripping away what society demanded. It had been 3 months since the fire. 3 months since the smoke had taken everything: her family, her home, her very place in the world. Now she drifted through the city like a ghost herself, living in a cramped boarding room with peeling wallpaper and windows that wouldn't quite shut. There were days she didn't recognize her own face in the mirror. Days she wondered if she was still truly there at all. The market was nearly deserted as she wandered past shuttered shops and vendors hurriedly packing their goods against the coming storm. Only one storefront remained open, an antique shop. Wedged between 2 crumbling buildings like a forgotten tooth, its sign swung wildly in the wind, the lettering so faded it was impossible to read. In the window, beneath layers of dust, something caught her eye. A glimmer. A pulse. Isadora found herself drawn closer without meaning to. There, propped against an ornate chaise, was a mirror. But not like any mirror she had ever seen. The frame was carved from dark wood so deeply stained it almost seemed black, curling into twisting patterns of roses, thorns, and hidden faces. At the very top, nearly hidden among the vines, was a small carving of 3 crescent moons, chained together by delicate iron links. And the glass itself, it wasn't smooth. It rippled faintly, as though a thin veil of water shifted just beneath the surface. Isadora's heart beat faster. The reflection it offered was not the market behind her. It was something else. A ballroom, grand and ruined. A chandelier hanging by a thread. Shadows twirling in endless, broken waltzes. And in the center of it all, a woman. A woman who wore Isadora's face, but smiled a smile Isadora had never learned. The door to the shop creaked open, though no one appeared behind it. The bell above it let out a soft, mournful chime, as if inviting her inside. Isadora hesitated. Common sense scraped against her frayed nerves. Her grief had made her reckless, but she was not yet foolish. And yet, she had nothing left to lose. With a trembling breath, she pushed the door open wider and stepped into the gloom. The air inside smelled of dust, old wax, and something sweeter, something sharp and metallic, like rusted iron and crushed rose petals. The mirror sat near the back of the shop now, though she had not seen anyone move it. Waiting. Patient. No one greeted her. No clerk, no shopkeeper. Only the low creak of the old building settling and the distant rumble of thunder outside. Drawn forward by something deeper than curiosity, Isadora approached the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, but it was different. More vivid. More alive. The woman in the glass lifted her hand a second before Isadora did. Her smile deepened. Inviting. Beneath the frame, on a small brass plaque, a single word had been etched in old, curling letters. Yours. Isadora's throat tightened. The rain outside intensified, hammering the windows like desperate fingers. Still, she couldn't move. Couldn't tear her eyes away from the mirror. From herself. From what she might become. And from somewhere deep inside the glass. So soft she could barely hear it. A voice whispered, "Come closer, Isadora." She did. She didn't even realize she was moving until her fingertips brushed the glass. It was warm, breathing, alive. Behind her, unseen, the door of the shop swung shut and locked with a soft, final click. Chapter 2. The reflection smiles first. The shop felt colder now. The scent of dust and wilted roses thickened, pressing against Isadora's skin like a second, damp breath. She stood before the mirror, her fingers still lightly touching the glass. It pulsed beneath her hand, slow, warm, steady, like a living heartbeat. She withdrew her hand sharply, a shudder running through her. The mirror's surface rippled, just once, as if reluctant to let her go. For a moment, she stood still. She should leave. She should run back into the stormy streets and forget she ever saw this place. But when she glanced at the door, it was no longer there. The front of the shop had somehow receded into shadows, swallowed by a fog that curled along the floor like smoke. There was only the mirror now, and her reflection. Isadora forced herself to breathe. "You're tired," she whispered aloud, her voice too loud in the heavy air. "You're grieving. You're imagining things." The mirror offered no answer. But the reflection smiled. Not a comforting smile. Not a smile she would ever wear. It was too wide, too sharp at the edges, as though joy had been carved out of something that did not understand it. Isadora stumbled back a step, her boots scraping against the warped wooden floor. Her reflection did not move. It stood perfectly still, still smiling, head tilted slightly as if listening to something just beyond Isadora's hearing. The shop shifted around her. Subtle at first. The walls seemed taller, the shelves farther apart, the shadows deeper, heavier, almost breathing. And everywhere, everywhere, was the mirror's presence. Watching, waiting. Isadora turned away, heart pounding. She crossed the shop, searching for an exit. But the aisles between the towering shelves twisted strangely, leading her not toward freedom but back. Always back. To the mirror. When she looked again, she saw something worse. The woman in the mirror, herself, but not, no longer wore her simple dark shawl. No. Now the reflection was dressed in something far grander. A gown of black velvet, shimmering with ghostly embroidery. Sleeves slit wide and heavy with trailing lace. A jeweled choker tight around the throat, gleaming with stones that looked suspiciously like blood drops caught in crystal. Isadora touched her own collarbone. Rough wool, not velvet. No jewelry, no finery. And yet, inside the mirror, her other self twirled slowly, letting the heavy dress sweep the cracked ballroom floor. Smiling all the while. "You could be so beautiful," a voice purred softly from within the glass. "You could be whole again." Isadora's throat closed. She hadn't heard that voice in months. It was her mother's voice. Dead. Gone. Burned with the house and everything she had ever loved. Her eyes stung with sudden, helpless tears. She reached again for the mirror. Not meaning to. Not wanting to. Needing to. The surface shivered at her touch, sending a fine tremor through the floorboards beneath her. The reflection smiled wider. It extended a hand exactly like hers. Only, the nails were just a little too sharp, the fingers a little too long, the skin just a little too pale. Thunder cracked outside. The mirror trembled. The shop whispered. And Isadora whispered back, her voice broken and small. "What do you want from me?" The reflection leaned forward, its forehead pressed against the glass. Cracks spiderwebbed out from where it touched, faint and glimmering like veins of frozen blood. It opened its mouth, and the voice that came was not hers. "Only everything, my love." Chapter 3. The Mirror's First Gift. The next morning, Isadora awoke in her cramped boarding room with a start. Rain still lashed the streets outside. The city moaned and shifted under the storm. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. The cursed shop, the mirror, the reflection that wasn't quite her own. A nightmare born of grief and sleepless nights. But then she sat up. And there, across the room, leaned against the cracked wall, was the mirror. The same blackwood frame, the same thorn vines and chained moons. No mistaking it. It had followed her home. Or she had brought it. She didn't remember. Isadora pulled her thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. The mirror's surface was calm now. Ordinary. Only her tired reflection stared back at her. Yet as she watched, something flickered. Just beneath the glass. A movement that wasn't hers. Slowly, almost cautiously, she approached. There was something resting against the bottom edge of the frame now. Something that hadn't been there before. A necklace. Delicate, ancient, gleaming faintly in the watery morning light. It was a choker made of velvet ribbon, adorned with a single blood-red stone cut into the shape of a tear. Isadora gasped softly. She recognized it. Her mother had worn a necklace just like it in the old portraits that hung above the fireplace, before the fire devoured everything. The necklace had been lost. Destroyed. Gone. And yet, here it was, waiting for her. Trembling, she reached out. The mirror's surface rippled once, shivering at her touch, but the necklace slipped easily into her hand, as if it had always belonged to her. The velvet was cool against her palm. The stone pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. She slipped it around her throat without thinking. The moment the clasp fastened, warmth bloomed in her chest. radiating outward like a second skin. For the first time in months, Isadora felt seen, felt real. She stared at herself in the mirror. But the woman gazing back wasn't the haggard, hollow creature she had been yesterday. Her skin was luminous. Her hair, once dull and tangled, gleamed in the light. Her eyes, once rimmed red with weeping, shone clear and sharp. She looked alive again. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from grief. They were from something dangerously close to joy. The mirror whispered in her mind, soft as silk. "See how beautiful you are? How easily the world could love you again. All you must do is trust me." Isadora pressed her fingers against the necklace. It fit perfectly. It felt right. Behind her, the wind howled. The window rattled violently. But inside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of roses and smoke. The mirror pulsed again. Another gift materialized at the base of the frame. A hairbrush, carved of dark wood and ivory, inlaid with thorn patterns matching the mirror's vines. She picked it up before she realized what she was doing. Ran it through her hair. Each stroke seemed to pull away not just tangles, but sorrow itself. Her grief faded with every pass of the brush. Her memories blurred at the edges. The pain, the fire, the loss, slipping away like hair caught on a comb. Isadora smiled at her reflection. For the first time in what felt like years. She didn't notice that the reflection smiled first. Before she didn't notice that behind the surface of the glass, dozens of faint, blurred figures stirred. Watching, waiting, silent, hungry. That night, she slept deeper than she had since the fire. And she dreamed of a ballroom bathed in crimson light, where shadows and beautiful gowns danced without faces. And somewhere, in the center of it all, a mirror spun slowly on its own axis. Its surface cracked, weeping red, calling her name. Chapter 4. The Mirror Demands a Price. The following days blurred together like a dream. A beautiful, hazy, perfect dream. Every morning, Isadora awoke to find something new resting at the foot of the mirror. A pair of silk gloves stitched with black roses. A lace-trimmed gown the color of old moonlight. Slippers soft as whispers. A silver hair comb shaped like a serpent swallowing its own tail. Each gift fit her flawlessly. Each piece draped across her body like it had been made for her skin alone. And each time she accepted a gift, she felt stronger, more radiant, more seen. The people at the boarding house noticed. They whispered behind their doors as she passed. "Isadora looks different. Did you see her hair? Her skin. She doesn't even seem real anymore." Isadora smiled at their jealousy. It rolled off her like rain off polished stone. For the first time since the fire, she felt alive. But small things began to shift around her. Small, almost dismissible things. The first time she noticed, she was brushing her hair before bed, admiring the way the mirror caught the light. She reached for the candle to snuff it, and her hand, for the briefest moment, did not move in sync with her reflection. Her real hand faltered. The hand in the mirror moved smoothly, gracefully, extinguishing the candle with a smile Isadora had not yet made. She froze, heart pounding. She stared into the mirror, willing the illusion to break. The reflection returned to normal. Perfect. Innocent. She shook herself. It's the fatigue, she thought. The late nights. The change in her fortunes. Surely grief played stranger tricks than these. The second warning came at the boarding house. She passed a neighbor's room, Mrs. Winthrop, an old widow who had lived in the building for decades. The door was ajar. Inside, the old woman sat slumped over her dressing table, a cracked mirror tilted against the wall. Blood pooled across the floor. Her reflection in the broken mirror still moved, even though Mrs. Winthrop herself was still, very still. Isadora stumbled back, stifling a scream. The corridor swam in front of her. Had the old woman been sick? Had she fallen? Was this an accident? But somewhere deep inside, Isadora knew. The mirrors were waking, hungering. She fled to her room, locking the door behind her. The black-framed mirror stood waiting, patient, smiling. At its base, another gift had appeared. A pair of pearl earrings, shining like tiny moons. They glowed softly in the gloom, beautiful and terrible. Isadora stared at them. For the first time, hesitating. Her reflection beckoned silently, wearing the earrings already, looking more magnificent than ever. And behind her reflection, barely visible unless one looked too closely, were the blurred figures again. More now. Shadows gathering like moths around a flame. Some weeping, some screaming without sound, some pressing bloody palms against the inside of the glass. Isadora backed away from the mirror, but her body trembled with longing. To be seen, to be wanted, to be loved. The mirror pulsed once. The earrings quivered slightly on the wooden floor, almost as if they were breathing. Isadora whispered into the silent room. "What do you want from me?" The mirror answered, in her mother's voice. Soft, sweet, unforgiving. "Only your best self, darling. Only the part of you you never deserved anyway." Lightning slashed across the sky outside. Thunder cracked the bones of the city. The mirror's surface rippled, and for a heartbeat, she saw her own face. Blood dripping from her ears, the earrings welded to her flesh. And still smiling. Smiling so wide the skin split at the corners of her mouth. Isadora shrieked and stumbled back, knocking over her chair. The vision vanished. The mirror returned to normal. Silent. Waiting. The earrings still lay at her feet. Perfect. Innocent. Isadora crawled into bed and pulled the thin covers over her head like a child hiding from nightmares. But she knew. The price had begun, and the mirror was just getting started. Chapter 5. The Invitation in Glass. Days passed, or perhaps it was only hours. Time seemed to blur inside Isadora's small, darkened room, where the storm outside never truly lifted and the mirror's presence grew heavier by the hour. She no longer ventured beyond the boarding house. The other tenants, once wary, now crossed themselves when she passed in the halls. She caught whispers. "She's cursed. It follows her, you can smell it. The glass is watching." Isadora barely heard them. Her world had narrowed to one point of gravity. The mirror. At first, she tried to resist. She refused the gifts that appeared each night. The silk gloves, the blood-red brooch, the black satin shoes stitched with thorny vines. She locked them away in the cracked armoire, refusing to wear them, refusing to listen to the mirror's soft, coiling whispers. But resistance had its price, too. The more she ignored it, the more her surroundings seemed to wither. Her reflection became paler, thinner. Her hair dulled again to ash and tangles. Her skin cracked in the dry, oppressive air. It was as if the world itself began starving her, leaving her with only one source of beauty, one source of life. The mirror. One evening, as the rain slowed to a dismal drizzle, Isadora sat hunched in her chair by the window, staring at nothing. Weary, broken, hollow. That was when the mirror made its next move. A soft knock echoed through the room, not at the door, but from the mirror itself. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Isadora turned. The mirror's surface had changed again. It no longer reflected her tiny, crumbling room. Instead, it revealed a long corridor lined with candelabras, their flames dancing without heat. At the end of the hall stood a pair of heavy doors, carved with the same chained crescent moons that adorned the mirror's frame. And behind those doors, she could hear it. Faint. A sound that clawed at the hollow place inside her chest. Her mother's voice. Laughing softly. Calling her name. Isadora. The voice sang, muffled but sweet. "Come home, darling." Tears flooded Isadora's eyes. She stumbled to her feet, heart hammering. She pressed her hand against the glass. It pulsed warmly under her touch, as if recognizing her, welcoming her. The doors at the end of the corridor began to creak open. A soft, golden light spilled out. And standing there, waiting in the glow, were the silhouettes of 3 figures. Her mother, her father, her little sister, Clara. Whole, alive, smiling. "Come to us," they called. Their voices layered over each other like a lullaby. "Come home." Isadora sobbed, her body trembling with the force of want. To step through that glass. To run into their arms. To forget the fire. The loss. The loneliness. But deep beneath the sweetness, another sound lingered. A wet, slithering noise. Like hands rubbing together. Like lips parting with hunger. She hesitated. Her fingertips rested against the mirror's surface. And slowly, so slowly, the glass thinned beneath her touch, becoming soft as water. Passable. Behind the family, deeper into the golden light, she caught a glimpse of something else. A ballroom, cracked and bleeding. Mirrors lining the walls, each one cracked and weeping, shadows writhing just beneath the floorboards. And overhead, carved into the ceiling in rotting gold leaf. "Welcome home." The smile froze on her mother's face. The skin stretched too tight. The eyes hollowed into black pits. Her sister's hands were no longer hands. They had become twisted claws, reaching. And her father's mouth opened in a rictus grin, revealing rows of teeth too sharp, too long. Isadora screamed and stumbled back from the mirror. The surface snapped closed like a door slammed shut. The room returned to its suffocating silence. The mirror reflected only her own terrified, broken form once more. She fell to her knees, gasping for breath. The whisper came again, soft and insidious. "You could have had them, my love. You chose loneliness instead." Isadora pressed her fists against her ears, trying to block it out. But she could not unsee what she had seen. The truth. The mirror did not offer her salvation. It offered her a cage, one she would never escape. And still, even knowing that, her heart ached with longing, because the dead had smiled at her. And even a false home seemed sweeter than a life lived in ashes. Isadora wept until she slept. And in her dreams, she walked barefoot through endless corridors of cracked glass, each mirror reflecting not her face, but her open grave. Chapter 6. The Blood in the Frame. Isadora woke just before dawn. Gray light spilled through the thin curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows across the cramped room. For a moment, she lay still, her body aching as though she had been running for hours in her sleep. Her throat was dry, her limbs heavy, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered, "Look." She turned her head. The mirror still stood there, silent, waiting. But now, the frame was different. Thin, hairline cracks spiderwebbed through the once flawless glass. Not across the surface, but within the reflection itself. The vines carved into the blackwood frame seemed darker, more alive. And woven among the roses and thorns were veins, dark red, pulsing faintly with each slow beat of her own heart. Isadora sat up, heart hammering. She wiped a shaking hand across her mouth, and her fingers came away stained with blood. She stared at her hand in horror. More blood trickled from her nose now, slow and warm. A single crimson droplet splashed onto the dusty wooden floor. The mirror pulsed again, a deep, slow rhythm matching her quickening heartbeat. And then she saw it, where the blood had fallen. The floorboards beneath the mirror shifted, and something bloomed. Tiny black vines curled up from the wood, thirsty, trembling, reaching. They grew toward the base of the mirror, and as they touched it, the veins on the frame thickened, gorged themselves, pulsed greedily. Isadora scrambled back, her breath catching in her throat. The gifts she had refused, the earrings, the brooch, the gloves, had withered to dust where she had locked them away. Ashes scattered across the floor. Forgotten. But the mirror itself had grown stronger. Not because she accepted its gifts, but because she had bled for it. The mirror did not care about gratitude. It cared about hunger. Isadora staggered to the small, cracked sink in the corner of the room. She splashed cold water on her face, scrubbing away the blood with trembling fingers. Her reflection in the mirror above the sink flickered. For one terrible second, she saw not herself, but the version from the cursed mirror. Hair cascading like liquid night, eyes burning red at the center, a smile too wide, stretching the skin into something almost beautiful, almost monstrous. And somewhere behind her, in the reflection, a ballroom again. But this time the dancers were closer, twisting, screaming, rotting as they spun. Isadora slapped the smaller mirror hard enough to crack it. The vision shattered. The room spun wildly around her. She turned back toward the cursed mirror across the room. Her breath hitched. At its base, a new gift had appeared. A gown, black velvet, lined with blood-red silk. The same gown her reflection had worn the first time she touched the glass. It gleamed in the dim light, beckoning her. Folded neatly atop the gown was a note, written in a hand she almost, but not quite, recognized. "Wear it, beloved. The dance is waiting." Isadora backed into the corner of the room. Terror clawed at her chest. She realized now what the mirror wanted. Not just her longing, not just her grief. It wanted her to put on the gown, to complete the transformation, to become the reflection, to become its bride. The black vines on the floor crept another inch forward, curling around the legs of her bed. The air thickened. The mirror pulsed again. She had to make a choice. Soon. Or the choice would be made for her. Outside, the first rays of sickly morning light pierced the storm clouds. But inside Isadora's room, it was twilight still. A twilight that belonged to the mirror now. And to her, if she let it. Chapter 7. The Dance of the Hollow Bride. The gown lay at the base of the mirror like an offering. Like a trap baited with velvet and longing. Its black fabric seemed almost to drink the weak morning light, absorbing it until the entire room dimmed, shadows stretching and yawning across the floor. Isadora stared at it, her breathing shallow. The pulse of the mirror matched the frantic drumbeat of her heart. Wear it, beloved. The dance is waiting. The words still shimmered on the note, the ink seeming wet and alive. Every part of her screamed to run, to tear the mirror down, to burn the gown, to smash every reflective surface in her world until nothing of it remained. And yet, her feet moved of their own accord, one trembling step after another. Drawn like a moth to the blood-red flame, she sank to her knees before the mirror. Her fingers brushed the velvet. It was cold, so cold it burned. The scent of roses and rot filled her nose, sweet and putrid at once. The gown whispered under her touch. A soft sigh, like breath escaping a tomb. Put me on. Tears stung her eyes. I don't want this, she whispered brokenly. Her reflection in the mirror smiled wider. The cracked ballroom behind it lit with 100 flickering candles, their flames twisted into shapes that looked like reaching hands. Behind the reflection, the dancers spun faster. Their faces were visible now, and Isadora saw what they truly were. Corpses dressed in finery. Hollow eye sockets leaking black tears. Broken mouths stitched into grotesque smiles. Every dancer wore a blood-stained version of the gown she now touched. Every dancer was trapped mid-waltz, bleeding but still moving. And at the center of the floor, an empty space. Waiting. Just her size. Isadora sobbed, dragging her hands back from the gown as if burned. The mirror pulsed harder now, the frame groaning under the strain. Cracks spiderwebbed outward along the glass. Blood seeped from the vines carved into the wood, dripping onto the floor. The black tendrils on the ground quivered, reaching greedily toward her. The voice came again, low and patient. You are mine already, little Isadora. You have been since the first tear you shed into the glass. The room around her dimmed further, until there was no color left except the shimmering red at the heart of the mirror. Isadora closed her eyes. She thought of the fire, the smoke, the screams, the way she had survived when no one else had, the guilt she carried like an anchor, the hollow space inside her that no amount of mourning could fill. Was it any wonder the mirror found her so easily? But somewhere deeper, a spark flickered. She had survived once. She could survive again. She opened her eyes, and she did something the mirror did not expect. She laughed, a broken, bitter, desperate laugh that tasted of ash and defiance. No, she rasped, dragging herself backward across the floor. I will not dance for you. The mirror shuddered. A low, groaning sound vibrated through the floorboards. The reflection snarled, the beautiful facade breaking apart. The reflection's mouth split open wider, jaw unhinging like a snake's. The ballroom collapsed into darkness. The dancers lunged forward, arms outstretched, shrieking in silence. The gown at her feet reared up, twisting like a living thing, black tendrils reaching for her wrists, her ankles. Isadora scrambled to her feet. The blood-stained vines snared her ankle, pulling her down. She kicked and tore at them, the black velvet burning against her skin like acid. With a scream, she grabbed the silver comb from the dresser, the one she had foolishly accepted weeks ago, and slashed at the vines. They shrieked like wounded animals as they withdrew, smoking where the comb touched them. The mirror cracked deeper, a spiderweb of bleeding fractures splitting across its surface. The world inside it buckled and screamed. The reflection clawed at the inside of the glass. Isadora turned and ran. She didn't look back. Behind her, the mirror howled. The last thing she heard before she slammed her door and fled into the rain-soaked streets was the hollow, mournful wail of something losing its chosen bride. But even as she escaped, even as she staggered into the misty dawn, something inside her knew. The mirror was not done. It had her blood. It had her reflection. And someday, It would come looking for her again. The story may end here, but the darkness never sleeps. Like this video to keep the shadows stirring. Share your whispers in the comments. Your voice shapes the next nightmare. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Gothic Hour Stories and Mysteries, where every tale lingers and every soul leaves a mark. The Gothic Hour awaits.